3, 2, 1.
Welcome everybody here back to The Missing Link. Today we're excited to talk with someone that had in one record-smashing night in his exploding hockey career. He went from the best line in junior hockey to an international playoff team of champions from Switzerland. He created a huge sale in Saudi Arabia, moved from Toronto to Budapest to Dubai, and unknowingly finds himself at the top of the food chain within the Illuminati organization. He's written some books about it, or written his book about it. He's been on many podcasts. He's been on The Missing Link before, Under the Radar. We have it in the comments and are in the title. He likes to share his knowledge of what happened about the gold heist, about Bitcoin, about, gold and everything that he's been aware of. He's been researching things ever since, and he's here to talk about what's happening in the world with us today. So how are you doing today, Boyd Anderson?
I'm doing very well. Thank you, Jesse. Anyway, yeah, I'll get right to the point. I do appreciate your having me on to express the truth. I'm all about the truth. No higher religion than the truth, I always say. But yeah, just to reflect a little bit, because it's been a while since I was on your show, and some people might have forgotten my story, but basically it began back in Medicine Hat, Alberta, playing on the same line with Tom Lysiak and Lanny McDonald. October 7th, which is actually Vladimir Putin's birthday. It was his 20th birthday. I scored 5 goals in 3 minutes and 7 seconds. That averages up. Lanny was in the penalty box, by the way, when it all took place. But yeah, so when you divide 5 into 187 seconds, it's averaging out to a goal every 37.4 seconds. And then when you Google 37.4, you will get the body temperature of your heart and lungs. So I'm all about the truth. I'll go back quickly to 2006 when I got into the quantum biofeedback business, dealing with your electromagnetic field. This is why they were so interested in having me come to Dubai. I created a contract with Saudi Arabia for 1,000 of them. I was in charge of a company called Quantum Alliance, and I had I was the sales manager for Ontario, and so I was selling 10 a week in Toronto and throughout Ontario, mostly in Toronto, mostly to the ethnic groups. They were selling for 20,000 a piece back then in 2006. So it wasn't long before a Lebanese Syrian came into my open house. And within 3 months, I had a contract with Saudi Arabia, $17 million deal. So I packed up. I sold my penthouse. I was living in Waterloo, Ontario, another very significant city. People don't understand. Canadians, I don't think, understand the significance of the University of Waterloo, where they developed the BlackBerry cell phone, which is on a complete different platform than any other cell phone. It's a military platform that they put up back in the 80s, early 90s. And the BlackBerry, the dean of the University of Waterloo at the time in 2006 was none other than our Governor General, well, our previous Governor General, David Johnson. He was the dean of the University of Waterloo, and then they built the Perimeter Institute, which is all about quantum theoretical physics. And so Stephen Harper was down in Waterloo all the time. He was the prime minister at the time. John Baird, his minister of foreign affairs, was down there all the time. So this has been in their plans for many, many years. So when I got to Dubai, I was just trying to sell medical devices, and I didn't know a whole lot about how the world worked. I didn't realize that the Jesuits of Canada are so powerful, and they work together with obviously with Georgetown University in Washington D.C., and that's where Bill Clinton was educated. It's a Jesuit school, and of course, I live in Saskatchewan, Saskatoon. So today we are going to talk about the criminal activity in Saskatchewan and Waterloo. There's a big connection because of the Bronfman family. When the Bronfmans moved over from the border of Ukraine and Moldova, they settled in a little town just an hour and a half east of Regina, Saskatchewan, a little place called Wapella. And, you know, today, Dr. Shahab, who's been chief of health in Saskatchewan, and had, you know, he put down the lockdown and he forced everybody to take a vaccine. Well, his assistant, Laura Rogers, is from Wapella, Saskatchewan. It's the old Bronfman connection. And just south of there, I grew up in a town called Wawota. It's an Indian name, means deep snow. But yeah, this is where Barb Porter, who was put in charge of the Saskatchewan Health Authority. I didn't know all this until I came back from Dubai, but she was put in charge of the Saskatchewan Health Authority, similar to the Alberta Health Authority, corrupt as hell. And her and this Paul Merriman, who I think is from Ontario, but somehow he moved out west and became the Minister of Health for Saskatchewan. And the two of them, when I got back from Dubai in 2008, the two of them were running around the world. I'm talking about everywhere in the world. They were hiring all the doctors to give out the jab that we went through in 2020, 2021 for the pandemic. And she came from Wawota, okay? And you see, because just south of there, we have Cannington Manor, which was back in the 1880s, was the home of all the illegitimate royal family of England children. They wanted to get rid of them, so they sent them to Canada, and they formed a town called Cannington Manor, which is a historical site today. They have all the current neighbors dressing up in the old clothing of 1880, 1890. And so these guys were were rich noblemen, you want to say. They had fox hunts and the whole deal. And they couldn't handle the winters, so they moved back to England. But the remnants are hanging around. They're still farming in Wawota, that area. You've got the Lincolns and the Weatheralls and the Wilsons. You know, they're all, you know, sort of remnants of that illegitimate royalty family. And you see, because Richard Leibel from Regina wrote the 16-year plan that we're going through right now. We're in the final year. Richard Leibel put in the water slides at Kenosee Lake, just 10 miles away from Wawota, Saskatchewan, okay? You've got White Bear Indian Reservation there as well with a casino. But that area is very significant. Not long after the Bronfmans settled in Wapella, they moved into the Balmoral Hotel in Yorkton, Saskatchewan. And remember, the Queen died at the Balmoral Castle in Scotland, okay? So they started the liquor business. Bronfman in Yiddish means liquor man. So they began the liquor business with Al Capone in Chicago. This is why they call Moose Jaw the Al Capone home away from home. They have the Al Capone, the underground tunnels, and so forth. But this is where the mafia originated in Canada and the United States, was basically through the Bronfman family and Al Capone. And that relationship has only gotten stronger over the years. So I'll get back to that. But Going back, I want to talk about the 20-page document that they showed me in 2008. After I spent a year in Dubai, you know, I'd spent every day with Thomas. He was their main black magic man. Okay, his partner was Richard Leibel, stationed in Bangkok. How Richard Leibel got deported out of Canada was he changed the legislature in Regina with the government to allow Asian money to come into Saskatchewan and to buy up all the farmland. The largest farm landowner, is owned by a Chinese guy by the name of Ho. And so they deported Richard Leibel out of Saskatchewan. They called it fraud. And they sent him to Bangkok to be in charge of this 55,500 tons of gold. If people don't know my story, please go on Rumble and simply do a search on Boyd Anderson, and you'll get about 25 of my interviews. So please watch some of them. Anyway, to make a long story short, I spent every day with Thomas. I overheard many conversations on how they had to get this gold, 55,500 tons of gold, down to Perth, Australia, and get it remelted because it was ancient gold. I do believe it was Babylonian gold. It was Solomon's gold that they talk about. And in order to get it stamped with the 99.99% purity, they had to get it remelted in Perth. That's where the World Gold Mint is. So I overheard a lot of conversations. I used to sit in Thomas's office and play backgammon on my computer because my deal with Saudi Arabia never did go through because because the company I worked for, Quantum Alliance, which one of the guys, Brian Thompson, who actually lives in Calgary, he's a complete scammer. He had told everybody, and his partner in Victoria at the time, they had told everybody in the world that it was a Class 2 medical device in Canada. And we were selling tens of hundreds, thousands basically around the world, all over. But, you know, they had actually been fraudulent themselves. They had paid a guy in England to attach it to an existing Class 2 medical device in Canada that didn't have anything to do with biofeedback, and called it a Class 2 medical device. So I didn't know any of this stuff until I got to Dubai, and the Saudis wanted authenticated proof, you know, but I couldn't come up with it. So, you know, I sort of delayed my stay in Dubai because Thomas basically kept telling me about this gold, how we had to get it down to Perth. And when we remelted, Boyd, you're going to be rich. They flew me into Turkey, Istanbul. I hooked up Erdogan, the vice president at the time. And then they took me down to the biggest hospital in Istanbul, and I hooked up the top surgeon. I do believe now that he was into organ transplants. I didn't know that at the time, but I've had many years to contemplate everything. Anyway, to make a long story short, I was running out of money and I had to get back to Canada. And one day he said, "Boy, do you mind leaving the office? I got a meeting." And so as I'm walking out of Thomas's office, al-Baghdadi was walking in with 3 other dressed up Arabs. Al-Baghdadi is born of Jewish parents. Okay, just so you know, I'm not anti-Semitic and I'm not anti-Islam. I'm not anti-anything except crime. And I think this is all about the love of money being the root of all evil, which we're seeing today. But anyway, so after al-Baghdadi left, I asked Thomas, what was that all about? He says, "Oh, just some extremists, no big deal, Boyd." So, you know, as the year went on, he brought in Mark Rich, who I had no idea who Mark Rich was at the time. but he just called him Mark, my lawyer from Switzerland. He's going to come in here and set up a Swiss bank account for you, Boyd, and we're going to be rich. We're going to be rich. He sounded like Donald Trump, you know, we're going to be rich. But, you know, it was all a scam. I came back to Dubai, but the day after Mark Rich, I met with him and Thomas. I didn't say much at all. I just listened to the conversation. The only thing I said to Mark Rich is I said, "Are you going to get the gold out of Thailand?" And he simply looked at me and said, "Yes." And that was basically it. I found out who Mark Rich was later. He was pardoned by Bill Clinton. In the last hour of Bill Clinton's presidency, he was forced by the Prime Minister of Israel, because Mark Rich was a Mossad agent. So was Thomas. They called themselves bankers, Swiss bankers. And Thomas always said, and I quote, "I work for the Swiss Jews." Basically, the Jewish bankers and I guess now the World Economic Forum. I didn't know that at the time. But Mark Rich is really the guy behind this whole New World Order movement. He would go around to all the countries, the shady countries like Erdogan and Turkey and Ukraine. He spent a lot of time in the Ukraine, I just found out, doing deals using Bitcoin. They used Bitcoin back in those days for all their guns and armament, using Mt. Gox. This is the exchange that got robbed just 2 weeks before Malaysian Airlines 370 went missing. And he was in the Ukraine all the time making deals, selling guns and weapons. And then they had then they had Silk Road, their drug dealing exchange for Bitcoin in the United States. And both of them got robbed by Thomas and Richard Leibel, the guys who ran the whole thing, because they have a secret back door to the blockchain. Everybody's into the blockchain. I'll tell you all about that, but it's totally rigged, totally corrupted, totally controlled. And once companies sign up with the blockchain, they've got you by the gonads. You know, if you don't follow their bylaws and their laws, they destroy you financially. But anyway, getting back to Thomas and this 20-page document, Thomas hands me a 20-page document the day I was going to leave Dubai. That was the day after I met with Mark Rich. Because Mark Rich, you see, was the same as Richard Leibel. Mark Rich was deported in 1974 out of the U.S. for the same, fraud, and he was supporting the apartheid in South Africa with any commodity they wanted while they were under sanctions by the American government. The same with Iran. But anyway, I want to talk about the Stephen Harper a bit and David Johnson, because that brings me to a huge criminal offense that they did. David Johnson came from McGill University, MK Ultra, and then became dean of the University of Waterloo, where they developed the BlackBerry phone. He was a hero, and they have the Perimeter Institute. That's on the same level as Cambridge, England, quantum theoretical physics. Stephen Harper was down there all the time talking to David Johnson, planning this whole thing out. And not long after, you get Cameron Ortiz, who just had his court case. I don't know how it went. He probably got off scot-free, but he was a Mennonite guy from British Columbia who they brought in 2015 to run the National Intelligence Center in Ottawa. That is above the RCMP. He was above the law. He was just a civilian. The reason I say Mennonite, because the Mennonites were all compliant in Germany before they came to Canada. They all complied to Hitler, most of them. And a lot of them are totally in on this whole scam, because there's a lot of them in Waterloo. Waterloo is surrounded by the Amish, the Old Order Mennonite. There's 27 different sects of not sex with a C of Mennonite people, and they're the ones that donated the land to build the University of Waterloo. Very corrupt place. This is where they're developing Ethereum today. Their symbol for their company is the pentagram, and Ethereum. Well, I better get back to the 20-page document, but I just wanted to express how guilty David Johnson and Stephen Harper are. And if you think Pierre Poilievre is any better, forget it. His manager of his cabinet is none other than John Baird, who was Stephen Harper's Minister of Foreign Affairs, who in 2015, when they pulled off his gold heist, he quit the government and he went to work for Barrick Gold. He left in 2015 when Barrick Gold had dropped down to just $8 and had to drive the price of gold back up. So this is why they created all these black ops in 2015. But this was what happened. It was a complete chaos. And they had all these black ops in Paris and Brussels. And they pulled off the Mandalay Bay shooting in Las Vegas, and Parkland High in Florida, and the Humboldt Broncos, which I'll get into later because it's pretty sensitive info. But I wanted to mention that, you see, Chrystia Freeland, all involved with this thing. Her mother was part of George Soros's paid politicians, if you want to say. He got her into the Ukraine, and between her and a delegation from Edmonton, they got in charge. They got control of the legal system in the Ukraine. Okay, and they were all working for George Soros. The end result is you'll see this Zelensky, the coke addict, like when he became president of the Ukraine, he immediately flew to Edmonton, Saskatoon, and Winnipeg. These are his people. But he's nothing but a coke addict and a money launderer under contract with George Soros. And, you know, they're buying up, they're using all these billions that Canada is supplying them with and the United States to buy up real estate and buy up places like Maui and, you know, Acapulco and, you know, Gaza. You know, if they want to put this canal through the Dead Sea.
Canal.
Yeah,
the Ben Gurion Canal. They don't want to go around Gaza,
right.
Because if they go through Gaza, they have to pay the Palestinians. So that's why they've destabilized, moved it all out, and they don't want to have to pay the Palestinian people for the canal that they want to go through there.
Right. Yeah, exactly. They just found a huge natural gas field in the Mediterranean. So, yeah, that's what that's all about. And then, you know, you've got Saint Germain. I don't know if you ever heard of that. Saint Germain out of Paris, who had signed Messi, the soccer player, to the largest soccer contract ever. And this is why they had the World Cup in Qatar, because Putin, Ivan Glasenberg, see, Mark Rich started Glencore. Glencore in 2016, the stock went from over $500 in 2012, 2013, came right down to $71. And this is when Glencore had moved in already. They had moved into Saskatchewan because Saskatchewan is the #1 place in the world for natural resources. We have it all, you know, potash, uranium, lithium, helium, agriculture, poison everybody with the GMOs. And we have a $350 million vaccine factory in Saskatoon called Vito. They moved it from Winnipeg because Winnipeg got into too much heat over the Wuhan Chinese connection. So they just moved it to Saskatoon.